Hello, my name is Don Kent. In March of 2017, I was diagnosed with Lewy Body Dementia at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm here to talk today about what a patient's perspective is in living with Lewy Body Dementia. But first, let me give you some background information. I was born and raised in Tyler, Texas. I went to the public schools there, graduating from Robert E. Lee High School in 1970. I attended Baylor University, graduated Bachelor of Arts in Political Science in 1974, at which time I entered the University of Houston Law School, graduating there in August of 1976. I returned to Tyler in 1978 and began my practice of law there after practicing in Houston for a short period of time. Beginning in about 1987, my primary practice was defending doctors and hospitals and healthcare providers of all sorts in medical malpractice cases. And so I learned a little bit about medicine, but I'd never heard of Lewy Body Dementia. After having some medical issues starting a year or two before March, I culminated in the diagnosis I received at the Mayo Clinic in March 2017. So I was primarily a medical malpractice defense lawyer up until that time. I retired from the practice in the end of 2017. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Lewy Body Dementia and its differences and similarities with a more common form of neurodegenerative brain disease called Alzheimer's. But I have gone from Louis who to I am Louis. The medical information about Lewy Body Dementia is it's a neurodegenerative brain disease like Alzheimer's. It has no treatment and no cure and is very unpredictable. The Lewy Body Dementia is an umbrella term we'll show a little bit more later, which includes two forms of dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies and Parkinson's dementia. Now, these neurodegenerative brain diseases are abnormalities of proteins in the brain. Alzheimer's, which is the most common form, accounts for about 70% of your neurodegenerative brain diseases. About 5.7 million people in the United States currently living with Alzheimer's. Contrary to that, or compare that to Lewy Body Dementia, there are about 1.4 million diagnosed and living with Lewy Body Dementia. The abnormalities in Alzheimer's are abnormalities in the brain called plaques and tangles, and the proteins involved are amyloid and tau. On the other hand, dementia with Lewy bodies, or Lewy Body Dementia, is an abnormality of the alpha-synuclein protein that form Lewy bodies. The Lewy Body disease family includes Lewy Body Dementia, which is the umbrella term for dementia with Lewy bodies, and Parkinson's disease dementia. Parkinson's disease is a cousin to this form of dementia and is also part of the Lewy Body disease family. I was diagnosed first with the dementia element, and thus mine is dementia with Lewy bodies. If you're diagnosed with Parkinson's and then develop the cognitive symptoms, it's called Parkinson's disease dementia. Now, there's about a 75% chance to 80% chance that I will develop Parkinson's disease as the years go by. So, crucial with the definition, well, before I talk about that, the medical information that I spent a lot of time studying medicine after I received the diagnosis and studying the background, and the Dr. Knopman at the Mayo Clinic suggested I buy the Mayo Clinic's Alzheimer's disease text on my way out, which I did. Chapter 11 in that book is Lewy Body Dementia. The criteria for diagnosing Lewy Body Dementia are contained in the 4th consensus article, which is shown up there now. This has been evolving over the years and to try and improve accuracy on the diagnosis of Lewy Body Dementia, which is somewhat hard to diagnose. There is currently a lot of studying at the cellular level going on with respect to Lewy Body Dementia. They're trying to come up with ways to confirm the diagnosis, make the diagnosis more accurate. And on the screen there is a page of an article having to do with taking skin biopsies to find Lewy bodies in various muscle tissue to help confirm the diagnosis. So central for any diagnosis of a dementia is you have to have dementia, actually, obviously. So what is dementia? Well, essential for a diagnosis of dementia with Lewy bodies is dementia, defined as a progressive cognitive decline of sufficient magnitude to interfere with normal social or occupational functions or with usual daily activities. Prominent or persistent memory impairment may not necessarily occur in the early stages, but is usually evident with progression. Deficits on tests of attention, executive function, and visual perceptual ability may be especially prominent and occur early. And that is an important distinction. So remember, first of all, that when you're talking about dementia, you're talking about a constellation of symptoms, and it's not a diagnosis in it of itself. You have to figure out what's causing the dementia for the diagnosis. But a little bit different between Alzheimer's and dementia with Lewy bodies. With Alzheimer's, now first of all, nobody experiences any dementia the same way as anybody else. So they're all totally different. Everybody that experiences whatever form of dementia experiences it differently. But there are several things that can be characteristic, although they may not be 100%. Characteristic of Alzheimer's in the beginning is a loss of short-term memory. And that is the classic presentation for Alzheimer's. And as a result, since it accounts for about 70% of all the dementias, the doctors screening for dementia screen memory issues very early. And that can result in you missing such things as Lewy body dementia, because as it says in the criteria there, prominent or persistent memory impairment may not necessarily occur early in Lewy body dementia. And in fact, that is the situation with me. I had perfectly normal memory, and all of my tests leading up to my diagnosis at the Mayo Clinic, and I had been told repeatedly that I didn't have Alzheimer's. Well, that was good news, and I thought that meant I didn't have dementia because I had never heard of any other form of dementia, such as Lewy body dementia. So you need to keep that in mind, that while memory impairment is very characteristic of Alzheimer's, it may not occur at all in Lewy body, and if it does, it may occur later. Now, in follow-up, my memory has begun to show some wear and tear. I've gone from absolutely normal memory to mild cognitive impairment with respect to my memory on my 1-year follow-up. But, as it says in that criteria of diagnosis, that visual perceptual ability may be especially prominent and occur early. I was taking the neuropsych test. Very important in diagnosing any form of dementia is to have the neuropsychology test. Take about 4.5 hours to complete, and it needs to be one that is includes within it some testing of your IQ so that you can compare your mental function to your IQ level. Again, I had a whole bunch of tests before I got to the Mayo Clinic that did not include any revising for your IQ level, and I was told I was completely normal and everything because I was functioning normally within the normal population. But at the Mayo Clinic, in the 4.5 hour neuropsych test, where they also do a little mini test of your IQ, it helps better analyze your mind's ability, your brain's ability to function. There is one particular test is on the visual perceptual ability of your brain, and they gave you maybe a booklet, and they have all sorts of diagrams and figures, and they want me to redraw those diagrams or redraw those figures. And they handed me the book, and I immediately looked at the book, and I said, well, you're going to have to give me a book that doesn't have these misprints in it. And the young lady who was administering the test looked at the book and looked at me, handed it back, and said, Mr. Kent, there are no misprints in the book. I knew then it was probably not going to be a very good day for functioning on the visual perceptual ability. And indeed, I performed 2 standard deviations below my IQ level, which doesn't happen by chance, since it's 2 levels below your IQ, 2 standard deviations. And that was a key component of my diagnosis, with the visual perceptual ability being somewhat impaired. Now, how does that translate to what happens to me? I have a little trouble walking on surfaces that are uneven and surfaces that change the type of surface. It goes from a rough to a smooth surface, and going up and down, it gives me a little trouble. I have fallen once on when a shift in the ground occurred, and I didn't see it or perceive it, and I fell. So also when I'm driving, I would pull up to a parking place and think I was up at the curb, and I might be 8 feet away from the curb instead of close to it. But don't worry, I'm not driving anymore. The driving has stopped. We'll talk about it more later, but I agreed with my wife early on in this process that when and if I developed visual hallucinations, that I would stop driving. That's another feature of this disease. And indeed, I did develop visual hallucinations, and I have not driven since, except one time. And my wife could tell you about that, not happily. But so with dementia, you notice that it is based on your ability to function. So it's very individualistic. I knew very early on I was having trouble functioning in my job. I was not able to work and prepare for trial and depositions like I could used to. I was having very short attention spans. I couldn't retain things as well. I couldn't stay focused. And so when you can't perform at what you're used to performing at in your normal daily activities, whether you're a housewife who can all of a sudden no longer remember or do her cooking chores or cleaning chores, to if you're a doctor and all of a sudden you can't really perform what you were doing as a doctor, then that's what you're talking about in not being able to perform your usual daily activities. Now, Lewy body dementia, like all neurodegenerative brain diseases, is a spectrum disease. That means it usually progresses, and the rate of progression can vary. What we have, you see there now on the PowerPoint, is the stair-stepping, if you will, of the progression of Alzheimer's. Now, you will not find one of these for Lewy body because it is much more unpredictable than is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is fairly predictable in the way that it progresses until the end stage. On the other hand, Lewy does not have that predictability. You can stay at one stage for a long time and then all of a sudden drop 3 stages in a short time. So it has not enough consistency for you to develop a stair step such as you see here for Alzheimer's. Lewy body disease is a multi-system disease. It affects a number of different body systems. It can affect the systems you see where they're interacting there on that slide. The 5 categories of common symptoms include cognitive symptoms, movement symptoms, sleep disorders, behavioral and mood symptoms, and autonomic nervous system symptoms. Now, you can have Lewy body and not have all symptoms in all 5 of those categories, or you can have Lewy body disease and have symptoms in every one of them, or multi-symptoms in every one of them. So it, again, can be variable, but most of us will have some of those symptoms in most all of those categories. Let's talk first about cognitive symptoms. Well, the number 1 is dementia. We've already talked about that. Also, very, very characteristic of Lewy body dementia is the cognitive fluctuations, which are unpredictable changes in concentration, attention, alertness, and wakefulness from day to day and sometimes throughout the day. And I can tell you this is a classic hallmark of this disease. You will feel like your old self one day, feel like, well, hey, I can go back to work and I can feel fine. And then the next day you can't get out of bed or you can't function. It's really strange, and it's frustrating, and it leads you a lot of times when you have a good day, a particularly good day, you think, well, maybe I really don't have this disease. You know, hey man, I'm feeling really good. You know, I can go back to work and everything's fine. Only to be the next day when it isn't. I like to drink coffee, and I have coffee all the time in the morning, and sometimes the coffee gets cold, and I'll go to the microwave to heat it up. And some days I can't function well enough to know how to heat my coffee up in the microwave. Now, my wife calls those the microwave foggy days. So, and yes, those still do come. I had a day a week ago Saturday where I couldn't function at all. I can tell you, in living with the dementia, with this Lewy body dementia, there are 2 types of effects on my functioning brain-wise. One is well, there's a constant fog. I'm in a foggy day. It can be a very light fog or it can be a very heavy fog. But every day has some measure of fog in it in my brain, just not functioning as clearly as I'm accustomed to it or had been accustomed to it. Secondly is, how fast does your brain move? How are things clicking? And I can have reduced function somewhat, but still be functioning fairly well. The days where I just can't function at all, the mind just doesn't move. And that was that day a week ago from Saturday when I literally woke up. One, I didn't recognize my wife. I couldn't tell you who I was. And that persisted for about an hour and a half that morning. And I spent the rest of the day in bed trying to recover my sense of being able to perceive things. The third cognitive symptom there is the hallucinations. Now, most of us, when we think about hallucinations, we think about visual hallucinations, and those are a common part of Lewy body dementia. Now, this is also can be common in Alzheimer's, but it tends to be later in the disease process in Alzheimer's. It tends to be earlier in the disease process in Lewy body dementia. I know that for the first year, I was worried about hallucinations appearing. My wife and I had gone Christmas shopping a year ago, and I walked out of the store and I glanced to my right and I saw this SUV and I saw this big rubber ducky tied on the SUV. And I went, Cynthia, is there a big rubber ducky tied to that SUV over there? And she looked over and said, yeah. I went, oh, okay. I didn't have hallucinations at that time, but unfortunately, within about 3 or 4 months, I began seeing things out of the corner of my eye that weren't there. They were not anything but shadows and forms that just weren't really there, and I could perceive they weren't really there, but still I thought that something was there. And then one morning I got up to go get my coffee, and I was walking into the kitchen. We have a room called the breezeway on the other side of the kitchen where my dog used to sleep, and I saw my very nice golden retriever dog there, and I went and petted her and talked to her, had a nice time with her. Only problem is that dog had been dead about 5 years, and I had a fully formed color hallucination, which I also have now seen spiders that way and snakes that way. And I'm able to know, I knew my dog was dead, so I knew it was not real. So, and that's the way it can be early on. As you develop it, you usually or can lose that ability to tell whether it's real or not. Some spiders I saw I thought were real. I even tried to kill them before I realized that they really weren't there. I knew the snakes weren't real. I was walking in the courthouse, and I saw a snake on a step, and people were walking right by it, and I knew, well, I don't think those people would be doing that if it was really a snake there. So I figured out that was the situation. But not only do we have hallucinations visual, we also have and can have hallucinations in sound, touch, smell, and taste. And I'm going to take those a little bit in reverse order. I'm going to go to taste. What is a taste hallucination? Well, I can tell you, because the first symptom that occurred to me was a taste hallucination. And it appeared in the form, or it comes in the form, initially, I just lost almost all sense of taste. I could put a jalapeno pepper in my mouth, or I could put a piece of steak in my mouth, and I couldn't tell the difference. And I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it might be related to a drug that I had recently started, and I stopped that drug, and it didn't change anything. Now, over the time, that has evolved to where I can distinguish things now, but sometimes my distinguisher is broken. Sometimes salt will taste sweet. Sometimes sweets will taste like salt to me. So every day, though, I have some level of taste hallucination, and I just the way it is now. And that has persisted to this day. Smell hallucinations. I've also smelled fires that weren't there, cigarette smoke that wasn't there, barbecue. I smelled barbecue. That was nice. I'd like to have more of those, but that can happen as well. Sound hallucinations. Now this one, these got to me. I was on the couch at my house, and I heard a train coming, and it was getting louder and louder, and I thought that train was going to come through the house. Now I could think, and no, there's not really a train because there's no train track around here, but it was real enough to me that I went and opened the door to look, just to check, but there was no train. So it's an unusual symptom, but we can have them. Touch, I have not had touch sensations. What are touch sensations? Feeling things that aren't there. I'm in a Lewy Body support group through the Lewy Body Dementia Association, and I can tell you that a lot of my people in our group do these. They feel things that are on them. Normally it's bugs crawling on them, or spiders crawling on them, or something that's on them. They feel like they may be laying in bed without covers on them, but feel like they have covers on them. So feeling things that aren't really there. I haven't had that yet. Hopefully I won't, but that is also a symptom. We also have movement symptoms. Now these would be the Parkinson's disease symptoms, the element of our disease that's Parkinson's. And you think normal Parkinson's, the rigidity, muscle stiffness, that sort of thing, shuffling gait, slow movement, tremors, and you can see the rest there. Now, I don't really think I've had any of those. I did have a very interesting episode early in my disease process. I woke up one morning and I actually ached from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And I mean, it was painful. And I got up and I went to the gym. I was working out then, and unfortunately I haven't kept that up as well as I should have, but I worked out, and that seemed to loosen things up a little bit. But once the day went on, I was continuing to hurt a little bit. I went to bed that night and I didn't go to sleep. I was aching so much, and I was thinking, boy, if this is the Parkinson's that started, I'm going to have to get some treatment. You know, I told you there's no treatment, no cure for the disease. There is no treatment for the disease, but we can treat various symptoms. And the deal with Lewy body in that regard is that if you treat the movement symptoms of Parkinson's, those drugs tend to have the risk of adverse effects on your cognitive abilities. And if you take the cognition drugs, you have an increased risk of those impairing your movement. So there's a very delicate system of trying to figure out what you can take and what dose. The doctor that I had at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Notman, is one of the old school doctors with Lewy body, and he told me he just quit trying to make those distinctions in patients, and he doesn't treat either. But I was telling you, if I thought if I was going to have to live daily with the kind of pain I was having that day, that I was going to have to go and get some help. As I was laying there that night, that whole achiness just left my body. I could feel it going out of my body through the bottom of my feet, and I haven't had any return of that. But I have been told that that episode is probably a precursor of Parkinson's at some point. So the Parkinson's elements are very prominent in this disease, and a good well over 50% of the people in my Lewy body support group have significant movement symptomology. And as I said, luckily, other than that one episode, I seem to have been avoiding that so far. Sleep disorders. Now, this is an interesting area because during my journey to diagnosis, I was not asked about my sleep. I got to the Mayo Clinic, and one of the questions Dr. Notman asked, how do you sleep? I go, oh man, that's awful. I don't hardly sleep at all. And he said, well, have you ever fallen out of bed? I said, no, I hadn't fallen out of bed. And he asked, have you ever hit your wife? Yeah. Gave her a black eye once. Sleep disorders, the number one classic sleep disorder in Lewy body dementia, and in fact, one of the key diagnostic criteria is REM sleep behavior disorder. And what REM sleep behavior disorder is that you physically act out your dreams while you're asleep. And I do that and have it for over 25 years. It's not unusual in Lewy body for someone to have REM sleep behavior disorder 20 years or more before manifesting the cognitive symptoms. So that was very typical for me. Now, there are people who have REM sleep behavior disorder that don't develop Lewy body dementia. So just if you're having those episodes, it doesn't mean you're going to develop Lewy body. But if you have Lewy body, you have about an 85% chance that you have REM sleep behavior disorder, which I do. And the most classic REM sleep behavior disorder dreams are fights. Yep, that's one area of dreams I've had. Fist fights, sword fights, gun fights, knife fights. Every type of fight you want to have. I've had it, and boy, is that fun, sleeping in bed with me, right? When somebody next door is having a fist fight or whatever kind of fight. The other is being chased. Those are the two classic ones, or chasing. REM sleep behavior disorder dreams, I have both of them. And chases can be on foot, car, train, bicycle, anyway, airplane, all of them, had all of them. So the good news for REM sleep behavior disorder is that they do have some things that try and treat it. Now, melatonin is an over-the-counter drug, and they try to treat it with that. That had absolutely no effect on me. But I'll talk more about what I'm doing to try and remedy that. Excessive daytime sleepiness, yeah, that's been a real bad problem for me from the beginning. I slept 2 hours almost every afternoon, particularly early on. I'm beginning now to not sleep it every day, and not at all some days, and maybe a little hour and a half some days that I do. But yeah, that's very classic. Usually you just are worn out by afternoon. Insomnia, now I always thought that meant difficulty falling asleep. I've never had problems with that. I can pretty much put my head on a pillow and go to sleep. But staying asleep or waking up too early is also insomnia, and I wake up 2 or 3 times a night, sometimes 4 times a night. I usually go back to sleep. Sometimes I have to get up and stay awake a while, but go back to sleep. But so yeah, that's a problem too. Another element of this is restless leg syndrome. And again, I've had that for 20 or 25 years. And that's where you just got to kick your legs. I mean, it's just an uncontrollable urge to move your legs and to move them fast. And I've had that. And there are 2 drugs that are approved for that. I tried one, had no effect. The second one I'm taking now and has reduced that activity quite a bit. So again, finding things that you can treat the symptoms does improve our quality of life some. Myoclonus, which is sudden muscle jerks or twitches, I also have those. I put it here in the sleep disorders. Mine always occurred at night when I laid down. Some people have these not necessarily at night. They have them during the day. I've had that occasionally, but most all the time is sleep disorders. The restless leg medicine I have seems to have gotten that under control as well. But this is the sleep is a big, big issue in Lewy body, and I had not been asked about sleep until I got to the Mayo Clinic. Behavioral and mood symptoms. Yeah, this is typical of any dementia illness. Depression, anxiety, apathy, agitation, delusions, and paranoia. I'm kind of reminded on the apathy part. Yeah, I developed that pretty strong. But you know, it reminds me of President Ronald Reagan when he was asked after a midterm election why the voters didn't turn out. He says, "Was it ignorance or apathy?" And he said, "I don't know, and I don't care." So I kind of feel that way occasionally too. Now, depression. Now, I'm an East Texas boy. I was born and raised here in Tyler. And let me tell you what your upbringing here is. Men don't get depressed. That's fine for women and children and that sort of thing. But men, no, you don't get depressed. It's just buck it up. You know, drink your orange juice and be a man. And so I always was skeptical about depression. During the course of my illness, I can tell you what got me to the Mayo Clinic is I had a thought that I wanted to kill myself. I've never had anything like that before. Now, it was a fleeting thought, but having never had anything like that before, I was a little concerned about it, so I mentioned it to my wife, and that startled her because she knew me well enough to know that that's not usual. And, you know, being from Texas and here in East Texas, we had guns in the house, and she managed to get all the guns out of the house and away. And it's a good thing she did, because about a week later, I was looking for those guns in the house, because not only was I thinking about killing myself, I was actively looking to find the weapon to do it. So, and I told my wife that, and she told my doctor, Dr. Courier, my family doctor, for many years here, and he knew that wasn't typical of me, and they decided they needed to get me to the Mayo Clinic. So, and I'm glad they did. But all of those things are typical. I have been on antidepressant since then, and with one exception, I haven't had any return of those thoughts or feelings again. Autonomic nervous system. The brain controls all the nervous system, autonomic nervous system functions, your heartbeat to your breathing and all that. I can tell you these areas of symptomology are extremely bothersome to those of us with the disease. We spend a lot of time on our Facebook chat group and in our phone chat talking about these symptoms and what we can do about them. Changes in body temperatures, it's the strangest thing. I can sweat when it's 10 degrees, or I can shiver when it's 110. And I will break out in a sweat laying in bed at night for no reason. Problems with blood pressure. I had the high blood pressure before, and this disease hasn't helped it any. I'm on blood pressure medicine for that. It's not unusual for those of us with Lewy body, although you won't see anything in the literature about it. We end up with pacemakers, and I ended up with a pacemaker. I'm not saying it wasn't necessary. I suspect that it was, but I think it was because of my Lewy body, because that controls the way your heart works sometimes. And my heart was not working well. It was stopping, and so they don't like your heart to stop because you only have about a 50% chance of it starting on its own again. And so I have a pacemaker in there so that when my heart stops, pacemaker will kick it on. So dizzy, and by the way, Alzheimer's is a predominantly women's disease. More women than men have it. And with Lewy body dementia, it's the opposite. More men than women have it. So do we know why? No. But that's the statistics. Dizziness, fainting, yeah, that was one of my early symptoms. My wife and I were in New Orleans. Her family's from New Orleans. We were down there for a wedding. We were having dinner Friday night at a restaurant. And all of a sudden I started feeling really strange. And I was trying to talk to my son who was sitting across the table from me. And basically I was saying, wasn't making a whole lot of sense. I passed out. I then was taken to the hospital in New Orleans. And of course, they don't know anything about me. They run every test known to man and couldn't find anything wrong with me. But that was the thing that got me started going to doctors to figure out exactly what was going on. A sidelight to that story is I was getting the medical records from that hospital to send to the Mayo Clinic when we were going up there. And I hadn't known it at the time, but they apparently they tested my blood for every known illegal substance to man, and assuming you got to be doing drugs or something that caused this. No, it was all negative, so I wasn't using any illegal drugs. So, but unexplained fainting is a symptom of Lewy body dementia. If you look in the text, you can find it. Frequent falls, I haven't had that, but I have had one. Sensitivity to heat and cold, again, that's kind of weird things I have, and those other things there can and do occur and are problems. So that's a constellation of the symptoms that you can have, and like I said, most of us have some in almost every category. Now, one of the reasons it's important to make a distinction in the type of cause of your dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's or not, is what we're talking about now. In Lewy body dementia, up to 50% of patients who are treated with any antipsychotic medication may experience severe neuroleptic sensitivity, worsening cognition, heavy sedation, increased or possibly irreversible Parkinsonism, or symptoms resembling neuroleptic malignant syndrome, which can be fatal. Now that's a mouthful, but what it means is this. If you get an antipsychotic medication and you have Lewy body dementia, there's about a 50% chance that something really bad is going to happen to you, up to and including death. And here's the problem. People that get diagnosed with Alzheimer's, people with dementia sometimes act out, all right? That's common. And one of the standing orders for treatment in nursing homes and some other places, in emergency rooms, for people who are acting out and they have a dementia, just a dementia diagnosis or Alzheimer's, give them an antipsychotic. And when you do that with us, you've got about a 50% chance of causing some real problems. I've mentioned the Lewy Body Dementia Association. One of the founders of the Lewy Body Dementia Association's wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she was in a nursing home and was acting out and was given an antipsychotic Haldol, which is the early generation antipsychotic, and she died because she was allergic. So, and that is a frequent issue with Lewy body dementia patients. I carry in my wallet a card that has this warning on it. When I go to an emergency room, I hand it to people, or I will have whoever's with me is supposed to hand it to them, because we need to keep that from happening. All right, this is a moment of levity here. The spatial relations I was telling you about, where I have a little problem with. Well, this cartoon sort of depicts that. What you have here is a couple of antlered animals, I'll call them elk, and one of them has run through two trees that were really close together, and he's been de-antlered. And the other elk there is talking to him, said, "Man, you need to watch your visual spatial relations, guy." And that's kind of where I find myself. So we're going to talk about a few things real quick, what I call pre-diagnosis takeaways, particularly for the healthcare field. Different experiences. Everybody that has dementia experiences them differently. So not everyone experiences dementia the same way. Number two, there are other causes of dementia other than Alzheimer's. Just because you don't have Alzheimer's does not mean you don't have dementia. Extreme fluctuations with Lewy body, it's characteristic. And almost everybody that has Lewy has these extreme fluctuations. Now, the interesting thing is that I've learned that the fluctuations are not only in your cognition, but they're in all those other symptoms as well. You can have fluctuations of your hallucinations, fluctuations of your taste hallucination. Every symptom you have seems to have extreme fluctuations in it. And important to remember is short-term memory may be intact in early Lewy body, not usually that way with Alzheimer's. But if you can screen for memory and memory's fine, doesn't mean you don't have a dementia illness. And Lewy body is an all systems and all senses disease. So I've already told you about the Lewy Body Dementia Association. They're the only national organization focused solely on Lewy body dementia. They're out of Atlanta. And they have the two programs I've described for those of us living with dementia. They also have programs for care partners or people taking care of people with dementia. I want to mention and definitely highlight here in Smith County, we have the Alzheimer's Alliance of Smith County. Truly fabulous organization, the front lines on this fight against the growing number of dementia illnesses. My local neurologist referred me there, and I'm here today mainly because of my contact there. I have become an advocate for Alzheimer's Alliance of Smith County. I speak to a number of groups and organizations about, so we can get some awareness about Lewy body, as well as what it's like to live with dementia and try and decrease some of the stigma associated with a dementia diagnosis. This is truly a great organization. People there, Stephanie Taylor, Luann Harms, and all of them there are just fantastic to work with and are giving me and helping me have these opportunities to speak to everybody about it. So if you've got somebody, you do not have to be on this journey alone. A lot of people want to keep it secret, and that's fine if you want to keep it that way, but get help when you need it. We can help. They have wonderful programs for both care providers and for people with dementia at the Alzheimer's Alliance, Smith County. Contact them, get help. You're not alone. And because I know that you can feel that way. What I've learned about post-diagnosis things now, these are the takeaways. We're looking for doctors that care. That sounds odd, doesn't it? Once someone is diagnosed with the dementia illness, patient and caregiver need reassurance of continued medical supervision and care. Don't abandon the patient. Now, I defended doctors a long time, and classically, we're not really talking about abandonment, but what we get in dementia illnesses is a feeling from the doctor that there's not really anything I can do for you. Here are these two memory drugs. There are two drugs that have been approved for treating the memory in Alzheimer's, and they've shown to actually be better for people in Lewy body dementia. And they tend to give one or both of those and then say, that's it, that's all I can do for you. I really don't care to see you. And it feels like we're abandoned. So what I'm talking about there is do more than just think about those drugs and give them and then say, get out of my office. I had a friend who was diagnosed and with Lewy body dementia, and the doctor handed the wife the script and said, when he starts going to the bathroom and in front of you in the living room, come back and I'll try something else. That's the kind of thing we want to avoid. Number 2 is coordinate. This is a multi-system disease. It may require referral and follow-up for other conditions, or it may require, give me some ideas that may slow progression down, that might help me. You be the captain of the ship. Don't make me do all these things. Quarterback. Make the calls and recommendations concerning our care and treatment. I know you don't have a cure for these diseases. I understand that, but please be up to date on what there is out there, that things that might slow progression down, and tell me about them. And tell me which ones you might do, and that sort of thing. Help me live with this disease. Involve both the patient and caregiver. Even when the patient has dementia, they should be included in the treatment plan and discussions. There is a tendency to ignore us once we have a diagnosis of dementia or a specific disease like Lewy body or Alzheimer's. After I was diagnosed, I went to see my financial planner in Dallas, and once I told him I had that, and this is a guy I'd been dealing with for 20 years, my wife didn't have much contact with him during that time. I was in charge of all that. Once he found out I had dementia, he did not look at me, talk to my wife, and never said a word to me. And that does happen a lot, and just let's work to eliminate that. What I'm looking for, I can tell you, is the things that will help me live with this disease. So patients and their caregivers want a cure. Sure, we want a cure. Probably not going to happen during my lifetime, but providing suggestions for improving my quality of life and do things that may slow progression. Please help me live with this disease the best you can. Now, I would like to close today by going to this book that you see there. It's called Still Alice by Lisa Genova. And it's a fiction book, but if you want to learn something about Alzheimer's and dementia, I would suggest that you read it. It's a lady who's a PhD doctor teaching at Harvard, and she's diagnosed early onset Alzheimer's, and she's asked to speak to a conference, and this is the speech she gives. So I'm going to, I give full credit for this, but I'm going to adapt it to my circumstance because I think it highlights what I've been trying to convey to you today. Good morning. My name is Don Kent. I'm not a neurologist or general practice physician. However, my doctorate, I have a law degree. I was a full-time practicing lawyer. I tried over 100 lawsuits to jury verdict. I even tried one that was televised nationally on court TV. I have represented doctors and healthcare providers from 1987 up until 2017. But I'm not here today to talk to you as a lawyer. I'm here today to talk to you as someone who knows something about Lewy body dementia. Now, I don't treat patients, run clinical trials, study mutations in DNA, or counsel patients and their families. I know something about Lewy body dementia because in March 2017, I was diagnosed with it at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm honored to have this opportunity to talk with you, to hopefully lend some insight into what it's like to live with dementia. At some time in the future, I'll still know what it's like, but I may be unable to express that to you. And too soon after that, probably I won't even know that I have dementia. So what I have to say today is, I hope, timely. We, in the early stages of Lewy body dementia, are not yet utterly incompetent. We are not without language or opinions that matter or extended periods of lucidity. Yet we are not competent enough to be trusted with many of the demands and responsibilities of our former lives. We feel like we are neither here nor there, like some crazy Dr. Seuss character in a bizarre land. It's a very lonely and frustrating place to be. Now, I no longer practice law. I no longer try lawsuits. I no longer take depositions. prepare for trial. My reality is completely different from what it was not that long ago, and it's distorted. The neural pathways I use to try to understand what you're saying, what I'm thinking, what is happening around me are gummed up with alpha-synuclein. I struggle sometimes to find the words I want to say and sometimes hear myself saying the wrong ones. I can't confidently judge spatial distances. And my short-term memory, while fine now, is deteriorating. I'll probably lose my yesterdays. If you ask me what I did yesterday, what happened, what I saw, felt, and heard, I'll probably be hard-pressed to give you the details. I may guess a few things because I'm a pretty good guesser. But I won't really know, probably. I have no control, and I will have no control over which yesterdays I keep and which ones get deleted. This is not a disease to be bargained with. I can't offer it the names of the United States presidents in exchange for the names of my children. I can't give it names of the state capitals and keep the memories of my wife. I often worry about tomorrow, sometimes even fear it. Some days I wake up and I don't know who my wife is. Some days I wake up and I don't know who I am. And what happens if this becomes the norm? When will I no longer be me? Is the part of my brain that's responsible for my unique meanness vulnerable to this disease? Or is my identity something that transcends neurons, proteins, and defective molecules of DNA? Is my soul and spirit immune to the ravages of this disease? I believe it is. Being diagnosed with Lewy body dementia is like being branded with a scarlet A. This is now who I am, someone with dementia. This is who I would for a time define myself and how others continue to define me. But I am not what I say or what I do or what I remember. I'm fundamentally more than that. I'm a husband, a father, a friend, a grandfather of 6, soon to be 7. I still feel and understand and am worthy of the love and joy in those relationships. I'm still an active participant in society. My brain no longer works well, but I use my ears for unconditional listening, my shoulders for crying on, and my arms for hugging others with dementia. Through the Lewy Body Dementia Association and the Alzheimer's Alliance of Smith County, and by talking to you today, I'm doing my best to help people learn about dementias and help others with dementia live better with dementia. I don't want to be known as someone dying with dementia. I want to be known as someone living the best I can with dementia. I'd like to encourage earlier diagnosis and recognition. The earlier we get properly diagnosed, the earlier we can get on medications and treatments for our symptoms with the hope of delaying progression and maintaining a footing on a plateau long enough to reap the benefits of a better treatment, maybe a cure. Please don't look at us as though we have a scarlet A and write us off. Look us in the eye, talk directly to us. Don't panic or take it personally if we make mistakes, because we will. We will repeat ourselves. We will misplace things. We will get lost. We'll forget your name and what you said 2 minutes ago. We'll also try our hardest to compensate for and overcome our cognitive losses. I encourage you to empower us, not limit us. If someone has a spinal cord injury, if someone has lost a limb or has a functional disability from a stroke, families and professionals work hard to rehabilitate that person, to find ways to cope and manage despite their losses. Work with us in the same way. Help us develop tools to function around our losses in memory, language, and cognition. Encourage involvement in support groups. We can help each other, both people with dementia and their caregivers, navigate through this Dr. Seuss land of neither here nor there. Someday my yesterdays will be disappearing and my tomorrows are already uncertain. So what do I live for? I live for each day. I live in the moment. Some tomorrow, I'll forget that I stood before you and gave this speech. But just because I'll probably forget it doesn't mean that I didn't live every second of it today. I will probably forget today, but that doesn't mean today didn't matter. While I'm no longer asked to try lawsuits representing doctors, here I am standing before you and giving what I hope is a very influential talk to you, and I have Lewy body disease. Thank you.